in any society, you have hawks and you have doves. You have people who think rationally, you have people who think erratically. You have people who think short term, you have people who think long term. Let me repeat, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is operating within the existing legal and normative framework. That cannot be emphasized enough.
So they're playing by the rules.
They're playing by the rules.
But they're testing the limits.
They're testing the limits with a new way of thinking, which is not against the rules.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. We're back with another session, the Criterion Concepts Podcast on the Seerah. In our last session, we focused on the start of the contradiction in the value system that Quraysh espoused for generations. It's what made them who they were. While they were Jahili Arabs, nonetheless, they had a system and they were very proud of it and they defended it. Every society reaches a moment when its values and its survival instincts collide. And that's kind of what we're seeing now. So in today's discussion, we actually go to the next step. When we heard or discussed in the last episode about the tensions that were rising amongst Quraysh, here now, and Assad will talk to us about the scene here shortly, we're actually stepping into the council, al-Nadwah as it was called, the Quraysh societal and political headquarters, where all the elites come together, and here now there's a little bit of tension, there's scrambling, and they're trying to contain what more and more of them are seeing as a problem. But things are not cohesive, they're not coherent, things are helter-skelter, things are falling apart, and so Assad, maybe just based on that, maybe you can help us flesh this out and help us understand what's happening here.
Yeah, so now what has happened is two delegations have gone from Darul Nadwa, or the Quraysh headquarters, for lack of a better word, to go to Abu Talib, the Prophet ﷺ's uncle, and to convince him, to try to convince him to hand over Muhammad ﷺ. And obviously on both occasions, Abu Talib refuses. So now the Quraysh are basically have a session, a brainstorming, and deciding on how to proceed to, one, contain the threat that they see emerging. And so in any society, you have hawks and you have doves. You have people who think rationally, you have people who think erratically. You have people who think short term, you have people who think long term. So this is very interesting. So the chief antagonist here now is Abu Jahl. Okay, it appears Abu Talib is not going to turn over his nephew, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we should take decisive action, even if that includes physical confrontation. And there are others who are saying, such as Utbah ibn Rabi'a, well, would you have turned him over to be killed if he was your son or nephew? And so this is what they're debating. And here, you have to keep in mind, the Hashim clan was a very respected clan. And they were responsible for providing for food and water to the Hajis for a very long time. This was their contribution. So it's just not that they were of noble origin. They had a very specific role in providing food and water to the Hajis. That specific clan.
To the pilgrims, right?
Yeah, to the pilgrims. That specific clan among the Quraysh. Right. Other clans had other responsibilities. So they're trying to really think through how to manage this predicament that they find themselves in. And they have to try to do this while they have to still maintain what they claim are values and norms which they hold very dear to themselves. And one thing that happens in this specific clip is that Umar radiallahu anhu, he's not radiallahu anhu yet, he steps forward and he actually supports the Hashim clan and Abu Talib's decision not to turn him over. He said, if Abu Talib were to turn him over, that is such an egregious violation of our values. Even though that's what we want, we would also look at them with contempt. They betrayed one of their own. And one of their own who had not committed any capital offense and has not committed a crime. Again, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is operating within the existing legal and normative framework. Let me repeat, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is operating within the existing legal and normative framework. That cannot be emphasized enough.
So they're playing by the rules.
They're playing by the rules.
But they're testing the limits.
They're testing the limits with a new way of thinking, which is not against the rules.
Right.
And again, thinking a new way is not against the rules. Advocating for the poor is not against the rules.
Well, they advocated for the poor before also.
Exactly.
But when they did it based on their own rules, not necessarily thinking about the welfare of the poor. It was almost, like sort of, helping their own status.
Exactly. And so a key point here is that if Umar radiallahu anhu says in this scene that if he were to turn him over, that means who doesn't protect a relative is not going to protect a neighbor. So that's one thing. And two, there's another major political consideration. That is that if there is a confrontation, physical confrontation, within a clan in the Quraysh and other Quraysh clans, that is going to weaken all of Quraysh, number one, because infighting always weakens both parties. And number two, the stature of the Quraysh will also be diminished. Because what are they fighting over? They're looking to violate their own norms. Because they are seen as people as guardians of the Kaaba, and they hold tight to their norms. So this is what they're really trying to go back and forth on.
Does that hostility potentially also create some advantage for the Prophet ﷺ that they don't want to give?
Well, yeah, see, so what happens here is, I think it's Umayyah bin Khalaf says that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's situation is very peculiar. He's advancing a new line of thought, but what's also protecting him is our existing norms that we don't violate clan loyalty. So this is a case of the way they see it is two values that they hold sacred in collision. One is honor tribal stability. Two, protect your own.
Right.
Against the third, right? And so tribal stability is the source of their strength and also the source of their power, in addition to obviously them being guardians of the holy place, holy Kaaba. But the fact that they have internally been able to keep things fairly aligned. Of course, there was always tension, right? And this plays a big role. And they said that even if we have to keep this in mind, Umar says that if the Hashim clan does turn over Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is one of the Quraysh clans, key clans in the Quraysh, that's violating their norm.
Right.
So they're going to be looked at contempt by even other non-Qurayshi tribes and clans. And we wouldn't want that to happen too. We would not want a clan. And then also the importance of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's lineage also comes into play. Because the Prophet's grandfather, Abdul Manaf, was the undisputed leader of the Quraysh. He's actually buried, of all places, in Gaza. And he was instrumental in helping the Quraysh become like a regional power through diplomacy.
Right, several generations earlier.
Yeah, he was the Prophet ﷺ's grandfather. Right. And he went regionally throughout, beyond the peninsula. Right. And said, please, visit the holy places, you'll be safe, etc., etc. Right. So he made the Quraysh, for lack of a better word, a regional influential
entity,
and power.
Right.
Okay. Obviously, they were not comparable to the Byzantines or Persians, but regionally, they were respected. Okay, because Mecca was obviously the most important city, because of two major reasons: one, location of the Kaaba, and two, the trade routes that went both south towards Yemen and north towards Damascus.
Right. Somewhat isolated, also. I mean, so when you're saying, hey, you're going on this route, on this caravan route, to be able to go to a city like Mecca, break your journey, receive hospitality, be taken care of. So Quraysh had all of that position. Let's maybe also think about the Prophet ﷺ's presence, right? I get the impression here up until this time, and please, comment on this, that, despite the fact that they are known, meaning the Prophet ﷺ and his followers and the companions, we said before he's playing by the rules, so they're not necessarily creating any disputation, they're not creating any problems for anybody, they're just present.
Yes.
So it seems like the presence itself is causing all of these tensions, and that's part of the sort of rock and the hard place that they're in, is he's not really hurting anybody. The people are not hurting anybody. We heard in a previous discussion how Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu himself also advised them, take it easy.
Yeah, maintain composure.
Right, bear it through sabr, and there are great things that lie ahead, right? So can you help us understand this a little bit more also?
Yes. No, see, because again, playing by the rules in the society in which you live is very important, right? And that also, so first of all, and then if we take it even a step further, the Prophet ﷺ's title was Sadiq al-Amin even before revelation.
Right.
So his personal credibility is completely unmatched.
Right.
They went to him for advice and even to help resolve their disputes.
Right.
So his stature was so high. So they can't say, well, he is a person who lacks credibility. And he was always someone who looked to create harmony within the Quraysh.
His credibility was such that I'm sure we'll touch on this in a future discussion, inshallah. But even when he's migrating,
yes,
at the time that he was migrating, and Quraysh is like at the height of its animosity, which plays a role, of course, in the migration to Medina in the first place, he still is custodian of many of the other Qurayshi people's items
and assets. Yes, right. Exactly. And so this is how we have to look at it. I mean, there are key questions we should be asking, probing questions. Again, what we want people to do is to actively engage with this era. Why is it so important to forsake blood ties in this society? Because it's a source of...
Why is it so important to forsake?
Yes, the way they understand it. That Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has forsaken blood ties, yet he hasn't.
Right.
See, he hasn't done that. He's saying honor your relatives, etc., right? He's not looking to get into a military confrontation with them.
Right. If they were able to prove that he was forsaking, then that would have been one of the offenses that could have potentially been grounds for them to have said, well, here's your guilty party, whatever it is.
Exactly. Right. And you see, and they're here. They have one of their own some of the hawks are saying needs to be, for lack of a word, disciplined. But then they understand that if you disgrace someone, or the Hashim clan is disgraced, then that will have a ripple effect inevitably of disgracing the Quraysh. And how do you balance contradictory values in this state? Which of the two values is more sacred, for lack of a better word?
They were trying to uphold the tribal traditions while betraying their own kith and kin.
Exactly. And the way that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is operating is he's able to create political space for himself to operate.
It seems as though some of them were, I guess, open to some type of open confrontation.
Yes, of course. Abu Jahl was the one who was the chief antagonist. From the very beginning. But even Umar says that if you go ahead and further antagonize someone who hasn't broken any of the norms, who's playing by the rules, who's an honorable person, who's Sadiq al-Amin, whose grandfather was your undisputed leader, who helped make you a regional power, you are going to inevitably cause more people to flock to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So your hardline stance is going to have the opposite effect. One, it's going to increase Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's followers.
Right.
And two, it's going to diminish you politically, and even if you engage in military confrontation, even militarily, in front of the non-Quraysh.
Right. So they're in this really serious, between a rock and a hard place. That damned if you do, damned if you don't. More plain language.
Yeah.
It's a reputational double bind.
Exactly.
Turning the Prophet ﷺ over violates tribal codes, but letting him continue threatens their elite order. So they're trying to protect power without losing their legitimacy as well.
Exactly. Yeah, oppressing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his followers will create more followers. And then on top of that, you're violating one of your most sacred things, tribal traditions.
And there's another thing here also, which is that what is the operational emotion that is driving Quraysh's debate? And let's talk mainly about the hawks here, right? So what is it that's driving the hawks? What is the emotion?
Well, for them, the most important thing is maintaining the status quo, because they're beneficiaries of the status quo. Not just from a stature perspective, but from a financial perspective, right? because they're the guardians of the Kaaba, and the gods are both, the 300 plus gods at the Kaaba are both their worship and their revenue.
Their revenue. So are they angry or are they fearful?
Well, see, this is the thing, that from people such as Abu Jahl, it's rage, right?
Okay.
How dare this person step out of line?
Okay.
But there's also a certain dose of, they don't see the Muslims as a military threat yet. So that type of fear. But they do see, if Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's followers increase, they fear losing their privilege. I don't think at this point they fear any physical threat, right?
Right.
But the thing is, they fear losing their privilege in that society.
So it is very much fear of an idea or a set of ideas.
Exactly.
That could ultimately lead to problems,
Exactly.
to say the least.
And one thing that we should keep in mind when we talk about this is, in all of this, they're talking about how to maneuver, right? How to limit the Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's message. The question doesn't come up, is what he's saying the truth?
Right. Right. They're not concerned about that.
Yeah, at least at this stage, no one says, well, he's never told a lie for 40 years.
Right.
Is what he's saying the truth? Are the deliberations about searching for truth, or the deliberations regarding how to maintain your privilege and your political and economic status?
Right. So they're not assessing the Prophet ﷺ's message on its own merits.
Yes.
They're assessing the effect of the message.
Exactly.
And how it's going to, I mean, in this case, of course, affect them and all of the pride and the pomp and everything that they've inherited and built up over generations. Here's an interesting maybe point as well, or question. What's the difference between authority and power? Are these two different things? Because
I mean, okay, in a modern context, authority would be seen as where you are on a flow chart in an organization, right?
Okay. Hierarchy.
I mean, power, especially for people of faith, would be spiritual strength and knowledge. You know, and then you have the three major instruments of power, which is money, political power, and then being physically strong. So the three instruments of power are money, political power, and physical power. But what I would argue is we have to strengthen our spiritual strength and our knowledge.
I mean, in this case, I'm talking about, again, Dar al-Nadwah in this whole episode, is Quraysh trying to make sure that its authority is not challenged?
Yes.
Right? And is that authority being challenged because they're recognizing some sort of inherent power in what the Prophet ﷺ is doing?
Yeah, because see, even some of the elite at this point, like within nobles, let's call them nobles in society, or elite in society, such as Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, Uthman radiallahu anhu, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, they have converted.
Right.
So this is just not that it's only the weak.
Right.
The majority of the weak, but there are also people who have enormous stature and they have enormous business savvy, and they generate wealth. They're very good business people. They're integral parts of the society.
Right.
So they do see this. They can't just dismiss it as it's a few. It's only the weak ones. I mean, they do say it's a few. They'll try to say it's a few imbeciles, but they're not. These people are very influential. Abu Bakr was very influential. Uthman was very influential.
Right.
And Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas was influential, and there are others. And that's something that they see as an emerging destabilization of the existing order. People sitting at Dar al-Nadwah are the chief beneficiaries of a system, and they don't want anything disrupting the system, whether it's the truth or not.
I mean, nevertheless, people who are maybe under the dove category, they were arguing to let it go, and by letting it go, and I think Umar radiallahu anh was part of this argument, although I'm hesitating calling him a hawk or a dove. He was just a voice of reason in that whole discussion. But for him also, attacking the Prophet ﷺ, it becomes an issue because of the effect that it will have on Quraysh as a whole.
Yes, exactly.
If you could help us contemporize some of this stuff, do you think there's any lessons for us today that we can draw, maybe in terms of companies we work with, communities that we're in?
No, I mean in the sense that every society that we live in has norms, and many times, and all societies do claim truth is important, and two should override all. But in many of these cases, you say political considerations, a political expediency becomes a dominant factor of driving decisions, not truth.
So the political consideration actually molds the truth itself, or the perception of the truth?
The perception of the truth. The perception of the truth. So here, the emphasis is not on, okay, we know he objectively he comes from noble lineage, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We know this. We know he was Sadiq al-Amin. This is his title, etc., etc. Let's evaluate the merits of his argument and then decide what to do. No, the issue is we must protect our tribal integrity and our status and the existing system that has made the Quraysh a regional power and the most important tribe in Quraysh because of, as we discussed, and that's what has to be protected. We're not interested in truth, we're not interested in that. And you'll see this, modern nation states, they generally, most modern nation states will say, we want to abide by international law. But are they really abiding by international law?
Very much a pick and choose what is relevant or what helps us. So in this case also, it's basically public relations, and I know you used this term last time, but that panic that is happening, that's what causes people to maybe make the argument that we can override principles here, and as long as we win the public relations battle.
Yes, exactly. For example, I learned this from, I think, Jonathan Haidt, The Righteous Mind.
Okay.
But he argues most people are interested in just looking right. They're not interested in actually being right.
Most people are
interested in looking right, not actually being right. And there are many studies that he quotes that talks about that. And we see this even in the corporate corridors of the U.S., right? You've worked at a senior level, we've worked at a senior level, and we've seen this. This is about presenting that you look right, which is more important than actually being right.
Now, very often we end up seeing things presented, even though they're not necessarily the best thing, and it's allowed to be presented, it's allowed to be entertained, even though there's a better option.
Exactly.
But it's only because the one who's doing the presenting needs to be entertained.
Yes.
Exactly. And there are much more obviously serious and nefarious examples, but I'm giving just more of a banal type of example. But this is exactly the principle that you're talking about.
Yes.
Anything else, Assad, that you want to maybe tie up, as we move to close the session?
No, I think a key point here is that whatever strategy we're looking to implement, right, it should never compromise the truth. And so, like, one example, I think it's a little sad example, is how some of the organizations, when they found out that there was improper conduct, say, with children, and they go different types of organizations, from religious institutions to those that took children camping and stuff, right? Suppressing that many times is a little bit more important than standing for the truth and taking care of the victim.
It's more important that they look right rather than
be right. And I think this is something that's a little disconcerting, is that we should be standing for truth. And when you stand for truth, there's a cost. That should be difficult to understand. There's a cost for standing for truth. But what we want is, you just can't stand for truth when there's no cost.
Well, but there's also a benefit in this case.
Well, yes, but no, there's always, that's the thing, there should be, inshallah, there's always a long term. But short term, many times when you stand for truth, it's a very difficult thing to do.
It's a difficult thing to do.
Exactly.
But the cost, or rather the difficulty, if you relate it to the benefit,
long-term benefit.
That's what makes it worth it.
Long-term benefit. And again, so this is a very good example of, people are trying to suppress the truth, right? Whereas if they highlight the truth, they will gain even more credibility and more stature in that society.
Right.
And that should be our mode of operation, to stand for truth.
Well, thank you, Assad, for the discussion. We're looking forward to further conversations, inshallah. So basically here, the Quraysh could not silence the Prophet ﷺ, not because they lacked power, they had authority, but because they lost clarity and they couldn't decide what the right action or course of action was in that case. When you try to defend your tribe, by betraying its principles and its laws, you're not really defending anything. you're exposing yourself, the weaknesses within, and that ultimately leads to collapse, downfall, etc. So here's what we'll leave you with today. After this, from this session, are we willing to lose a little power to stay morally consistent, or will we risk everything trying to keep both the power and some image of the morality, perhaps? Inshallah, join us for the next session as we continue tracing the story, not just of the Prophet ﷺ, but of the world that he and his companions were in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.